Okay, come on in, pull up a chair. I'm about to let you in on a little secret. It's a secret about the very fabric of reality, something that's hidden all around us, a dimension that you can never, ever point to.
No, really. Think about that for a second. You can point left, right, forward, backward, up, down. Easy. But what if there's another direction? A fourth spatial dimension, just as real as the others, but completely, totally invisible to our senses.
To get our heads around this, we have to do a little thought experiment together. This is our secret. So forget the world you know. I want you to imagine that you're not you. You're a simple, two-dimensional shape, let's say a square, and your entire universe is a gigantic, flat sheet of paper. Now, this imaginary universe, it actually has a name. It's called Flatland. It was dreamed up way back in the 1880s by a guy named Edwin Abbott. And it's a world that has length and it has width, but it has absolutely no height. Life in Flatland is, well, it's pretty strict. The more sides you have, the higher up you are on the social ladder. So circles are the priests, the top of the heap, and at the very bottom you have the women, who are just straight lines, and they're considered dangerous because if you see one end on, she's basically an invisible, sharp point. But the most important rule in this whole world, the direction up, simply doesn't exist. It's not just something they don't know, it is literally unimaginable. And this is where it gets really trippy. Because they have no height, they can't look down on each other to see their real shapes. A square, a circle, a hexagon, it doesn't matter. From the point of view of another Flatlander on that piece of paper, they all just look like a single straight line. So they're all just scooting around, living their flat lives, totally secure in their two-dimensional reality. But then, one day, something impossible happens. They get a visitor from the third dimension. So what do you think they would see? If a 3D object, something like, I don't know, an apple, were to pass right through their paper-thin universe. They can't see the whole apple, right? They can only see the tiny part of it that exists on their flat plane at any given moment. Well, the legendary Carl Sagan explained this perfectly. As the bottom of the apple first touches their paper world, a tiny point would just appear. Poof, out of thin air. It could happen inside a locked room. It would violate every law of physics they know. And then, as the apple continues to pass through, that tiny point would expand into a small circle. And that circle would grow bigger and maybe split into a couple of weird shapes as it passes through the core, all while morphing and changing in a way that makes zero sense. And just as bizarrely as it started, the shape would shrink back down, smaller and smaller, into a point, and then it would just be gone. Vanished. Now, if you were the Flatlander who saw that, you'd think you'd gone completely mad. It would be a miracle or a terrifying ghost story. But here's the thing, it wasn't magic. It wasn't hallucination. What they saw has a simple scientific name, a cross-section. They were only ever seeing a two-dimensional slice of a much more complex three-dimensional reality. The whole mystery wasn't in the visitor, it was in their own limited point of view. And this is where our little secret comes into sharp focus. Because this whole thought experiment, it isn't really about a two-dimensional world at all. It's about our world. This is the big reveal. That poor, confused, totally bewildered square, whose entire worldview was just shattered by a passing piece of fruit, that square is us. We are the Flatlanders. I mean, the analogy is just perfect, isn't it? A Flatlander sees 2D slices of 3D things. So it stands to reason that we would perceive 3D slices of 4D things. Think about it. A three-dimensional being would seem like a god to a Flatlander, right? It could see inside their locked rooms, it could pluck things out of their safes, it could appear and disappear whenever it wanted. A four-dimensional being would have those exact same godlike powers over us. Okay, so if we can't perceive this fourth dimension, how on earth can we even think about it? Well, the answer is we have to do it the same way a Flatlander could try to understand up, using logic, analogy, and shadows. Look, you just follow the pattern. It's actually pretty simple when you break it down. Start with a point, that's 0 dimensions. Now drag that point, and you get a line, 1 dimension. Drag that line at a right angle to itself, you get a square, 2 dimensions. Drag that square at a right angle to itself, and you get a cube, 3 dimensions. You see the pattern? So to get a 4-dimensional object, you just drag the cube at a right angle to all 3 of our dimensions, and the shape you get is called a hypercube, or a tesseract. But of course, there's a huge problem. I can't point in that direction.
And this is where Carl Sagan comes in again. He said, I cannot show you a tesseract because I and you are trapped in 3 dimensions.
But what I can show you is its shadow. Just like a 3D cube can cast a flat 2D shadow on the wall, a 4D tesseract can cast a 3D shadow into our universe.
And that shadow is this mesmerizing shape you've probably seen before. 2 cubes, one inside the other, with all the corners connected. Now, this isn't a tesseract. It's the 3-dimensional shadow of one. A real tesseract would have every line be the same length and every angle a perfect 90 degrees. The weird stretched out look is just what happens when you try to squash a 4D object into our 3D space.
This idea is so powerful, it's even made its way into the art world. In his famous painting, Salvador Dali painted Christ on the cross. But it's not a normal cross. It's the unfolded net of a hypercube. He was using this impossible geometry to symbolize something divine, a being from a higher reality, whose projection we can see, but whose true form we can't comprehend.
So here it is, the real secret. If a 4D object passing through our world would look like a morphing, changing 3D object, then maybe, just maybe, everything we know is a kind of cross-section. Our entire universe in all its beauty and complexity could just be a 3-dimensional shadow, a shadow cast from a higher 4-dimensional reality.
And that leaves us with one final mind-bending question, the secret at the very heart of everything. If our entire existence, everything we see, everything we touch, is just a beautiful, complicated shadow, then what is the object that's casting it?